After my husband died, I told myself I'd take some time, maybe buy a small trailer, plant tomatoes, keep things simple. But then the phone rang. My daughter Mara was crying. Her husband had lost his job, the house needed repairs, and the twins were getting too much for her. "It's just for a little while, Mom," she said, "just until we get back on our feet." I believed her. That was my first mistake. I moved in the following week, bringing just a few boxes and the quilt I'd made with Harold back in '82. The house wasn't big, but I didn't need much. Just a corner to sleep and room to be useful. And oh, I was useful. Every morning, I was up before the boys, packing their lunches, checking their homework, finding mismatched socks that Mara swore had vanished into thin air. I did the grocery runs, clipped coupons, made Greg's coffee before he stumbled out of bed. I even managed the bills some months, covering gaps when their car needed new tires or the AC sputtered in the middle of a Tennessee heat wave. "It's just for a while," I'd whisper to myself while folding laundry or scraping dried mac and cheese off the dinner plates. "They'll get back on their feet, and then I'll look into that mobile home." 3 months passed. Then 6. By the time we hit a year, I'd stopped asking about timelines. Greg didn't go back to work right away. There was always a reason. The market was bad, the commute was too far, the boys needed more hands-on parenting. I kept paying what I could. $400 here for car insurance, $800 there when the roof sprung a leak, $2,100 once when the water heater gave out completely. I didn't make a fuss. I just dipped into the money from selling the farm and told myself it's what Harold would have wanted me to do. The kids came to me for snacks and stories and Band-Aids. I was their constant, their midnight snuggler, their walking encyclopedia. Mara once joked that I ran on battery backup because I never seemed to rest. I laughed, though it pinched a little. They didn't see the late nights I sat in my small room wondering where I went. Not physically, but in their eyes. Still, I stayed. I figured this was what late life looked like for some of us. Not golden cruises or watercolor classes, but being the safety net your family didn't even realize they were standing on. The boys drew me pictures in school. One said, "World's best grandma with a smiley face and a slice of pizza." I kept that one taped beside my mirror. On the hard days, I'd trace it with my finger, reminding myself I mattered. Some weekends, I thought about that trailer. I'd seen a listing for a place out near Big Rock, a little 2-bedroom with faded siding and a front porch just wide enough for a rocking chair. I'd even gotten as far as printing the brochure and highlighting numbers with a yellow marker. I had a deposit ready once. But that same week, Mara called in tears. The twins' daycare raised their fees and Greg's unemployment had stalled. "Mom, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't desperate," she said. So I wired the money. Never brought it up again. Around the 2-year mark, I started keeping track, not out of resentment, just curiosity. Grocery runs, school supply lists, gas money for drop-offs and pickups. It added up, faster than I'd expected, not that anyone asked. One morning, I overheard Greg on the phone with his buddy, bragging about how they were holding it down and managing without outside help. I sat in the next room with the electric bill I'd just paid in full lying on my lap. I didn't say anything. Because that's what mothers do, right? We stay quiet, we fill the gaps, we don't demand thank yous or trophies. But that's silence. It builds up. It doesn't disappear. It just collects in the corners, like dust under a bed no one checks anymore. I tried to shake it off. After all, I was still part of the household. I still had my chair at the table. But something about the way Mara stopped asking how I slept, the way Greg never said thank you anymore, even the way the boys started calling me Ruth when they were around their friends, it all felt like little paper cuts you don't notice until they sting in the shower. One night, I sat on the porch after everyone had gone to bed. The cicadas were loud, but the house behind me was louder in a different way. The silence felt sterile. Like I was no longer stitched into the family fabric, just folded over the edges. A neighbor walked by and nodded politely. "Evening, Miss Ruth," he said. I nodded back, but something inside me tugged. A whisper I hadn't listened to in a long time. "You were supposed to rest now, not rebuild them. The next day, Greg asked if I could chip in just a bit for his truck repair. I smiled and said I'd see what I could do, but I didn't open my checkbook. Instead, I opened a spreadsheet. I started listing everything: dates, amounts, purpose, source. What I'd thought was a vague trickle turned into a full river of contributions. That night, I looked at the total: $24,067, $41. I laughed, but not the amused kind, the kind that sounds a little too close to a sob. It wasn't the money. It was that no one ever asked if it hurt to give it. I folded the printout and tucked it into the manila folder I used to keep seed catalogs in back on the farm. Then I slipped the folder under my pillow and stared at the ceiling for a long time. That's when I realized this wasn't just a phase. I wasn't a guest. I was a permanent fixture. Until I wasn't convenient. Some people wait for their revenge story to start with a dramatic scene. A slammed door, a fight, a betrayal caught on video. Mine didn't. It started with a missing thank you and a woman finally ready to remember her worth. It was a Wednesday. I remember because it was grocery day and I had a coupon for peaches. I'd just come back from the store, 2 bags of groceries on each arm, balancing the eggs like precious cargo, when I noticed the living room was unusually clean, not just tidied, but cleared. The boys' toys were gone from the corner. The blanket I kept on the couch was missing, and the framed photo of me and Harold at the county fair, that one was replaced with a picture of Greg's parents at their anniversary party, both of them holding glasses of red wine like they'd just been crowned royalty. I set the bags down slowly. "Mara," I called out. She came down the stairs holding a basket of folded towels, her face too smooth, too practiced. "Hey, Mom. I was going to talk to you tonight, but since you're here..." She paused like she wanted me to fill in the silence. I didn't. She shifted the towels in her arms. "Greg's parents are moving in." I blinked. "They're coming to visit?" "No, moving in, for good. They sold their house in Kansas and need a place while they figure out the next step." I waited for the "but don't worry, we'll figure it out together" part. It didn't come. Instead, she said, "We'll need the space, probably by the end of the month." I let out a laugh, not loud, not bitter, just stunned. "You're serious?" She nodded. For a second, I thought about asking her where she expected me to go, but I didn't. I just picked up the peaches and placed them in the fruit bowl like nothing had been said. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan. It was spinning too fast, or maybe I was. I tried to recall if I'd ever felt welcomed in this house, or if I had just been tolerated. They needed me when things fell apart, and now that things were being pieced back together, thanks in part to my money, my time, my care, they were ready to erase me. Neatly, quietly. Have you ever had someone smile at you while sweeping you out of their life like dust? If you have, I want to know. What did you do next? Did you swallow it, like I did that night? Or did you say something? Anything? Let me know in the comments, because I swear, sometimes I feel like I'm the only one who kept quiet too long. The next day, the shifts began. The thermostat, which I always adjusted to 72, was now locked at 65. "Greg's dad prefers it cool," Mara said, without looking up from her phone. The laundry room, my domain, was now full of labeled boxes, guest towels and linens, Mom and Dad G. One of them sat directly on top of the detergent I'd bought last week. When I reached for the paprika while cooking, Mara peeked into the kitchen and said, "Hey, just so you know, Greg's mom has some allergies, so maybe lay off the strong spices for a while." Lay off the spices. In a kitchen I stocked, with groceries I paid for, on a stove I scrubbed spotless after every meal. I nodded. Of course. The boys, my boys, didn't ask me for bedtime stories that night. "We're too old for that now," they mumbled. It stung. I still went into their room after they fell asleep, tucking the corners of their blankets just right. The kind of care you can't see unless it's gone. That weekend, I walked into the hallway and noticed my room had been labeled storage. A sticky note in Greg's handwriting was stuck to the door. "Use closet for in-law overflow." I opened the door. My quilt, my books, my lamp, they were all still there. But now they had been demoted. I had been demoted. That night, I took a slow walk around the house while everyone slept. I touched the dining room table I bought after Mara complained the old one was too small for hosting. I passed by the new washer and dryer I'd purchased during flu season when the boys were sick, and Mara was overwhelmed. I traced my fingers across the Instant Pot I got myself last Christmas, because no one thought to get me anything. Everything in that house bore my fingerprints, and yet I was invisible. The worst part wasn't that they were pushing me out. It was how little it seemed to matter to them. I sat in the garage, the one place no one had claimed yet, and opened the manila folder I'd tucked beneath my pillow. I flipped through the receipts, the bank transfers, the scribbled notes of every dollar I'd slipped into their lives. It wasn't bitterness I felt. It was clarity. They didn't see me as family anymore. I was a placeholder for stability, a financial crutch, a warm meal, a driver, a sitter, a silent partner in their chaos, but not a mother. I thought of calling Mara out, of confronting her, demanding she look me in the eye and say the words again, "You need to leave." But then I realized something. If someone has already made room in their life to replace you, there's no point asking to stay. That's when the seed was planted. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to take back what was mine, silently, one piece at a time. I woke up one morning feeling the house was different. It wasn't just the chill in the air. The thermostat stubbornly stuck at 65 degrees, but the way silence wrapped around every room like a thick fog. I shuffled out of my bedroom, the wooden floor creaking beneath my feet, and headed toward the kitchen. The house was quieter than usual. The usual clatter of breakfast plates and children's laughter was missing. The boys had stopped asking me to help with their homework or to read their favorite stories before bed. Instead, I found myself sitting alone at the kitchen table, spooning cold cereal that didn't quite taste like home. I glanced over at the family photo on the wall, the one that used to hang proudly above the fireplace. It had been taken down and replaced by a framed portrait of Mara and Greg's parents. I stood up slowly, my heart tightening. The photo of Harold and me, smiling and sunlit at the county fair, was gone, as if I'd never belonged. Later that day, Mara came to me with a plastic smile, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes. "Mom, the boys are getting older," she said casually. "They don't need bedtime stories anymore." It was a small thing, but to me it was like a door closing gently but firmly in my face. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Of course. The guest room, which I'd been told was mine, was slowly turning into storage. Boxes filled with the things I'd brought with me were now crammed into corners, hidden from sight. The chair where I once sat to watch the boys play was moved aside, replaced with a chair for Mara's mother-in-law. One afternoon, while folding laundry in the basement, I overheard Mara and Greg speaking in hushed tones upstairs. "We'll put my parents in the master suite," Mara said. "Maybe the boys can bunk together and we can convert our room for the kids." Greg's voice was quieter, but his agreement was clear. I stopped folding and leaned against the wall, the soft hum of the washing machine suddenly deafening. I felt as if I was shrinking, becoming less than a shadow in my own home. I thought about all those mornings I woke early to pack lunches, the nights I stayed up nursing fevers, the weekends spent driving to doctor's appointments and soccer games. All those years of quiet sacrifices that no one acknowledged anymore. At dinner, I sat at the corner of the table, my chair tucked in and untouched, while Mara's mother-in-law took a seat beside the boys. The smiles were forced, the conversations hollow. I ate my food silently, the taste bitter and cold. The boys no longer called me Grandma. They called Mara's mother Grandma Betty. It was a small change, but it stung more than anything. That night, I found myself sitting alone in my room, the walls closing in. I pulled out an old photo album and flipped through pictures of family holidays, birthdays, and simple afternoons in the garden. I traced my finger over Harold's face and then over my own. It was like looking at a life I'd lost. I realized then I wasn't just being pushed out of a house. I was being erased from a family. It was a loss so deep, it left no marks, no scars, just an aching emptiness. but beneath that ache was a growing pet. I wasn't going to be forgotten, not quietly. It was nearly 2 weeks since I'd realized I'd become invisible. That morning, I found myself at Finch's Cafe on the corner of Main and Elm, our usual spot every first Thursday. Camille slid into the booth opposite me, her silver hair catching the light like moonbeams. "You look different," she said, stirring her tea, "like you've got fire under your ribs." I smiled, surprising even myself. "I think I do." We talked about everything but the house at first. Her garden club meeting, the new novel she couldn't put down, the crooked mailbox she swore no one but me could fix. Then she leaned forward, eyes soft but steady. "They're erasing you, Ruth," she said, "not because they hate you, but because they don't see you as yourself anymore. They see what you give, and that's all they care about." Her words landed like stones in my chest. I'd known, in the back of my mind, that my home was slipping away. But hearing it out loud, being erased, felt like shards of glass under my skin. Camille reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "It's not too late to remember who you are," she said. When I got home, the house was as cold and empty as I'd left it. The thermostat blinked that stubborn 65 degrees. I didn't turn it up. I walked through each room, touching the rail where the boys used to hang their backpacks, the counter where I cooked pancake breakfasts, the laundry room shelf where my favorite detergent sat half used. Every surface held a memory, and every memory reminded me that I no longer belonged here. I went to my small desk in the corner, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank account. It wasn't a habit. I rarely checked it. But now I clicked through months of statements, highlighting every transaction that went to grocery stores, hardware shops, check payments to daycare, emergency vet bills for the twins' hamster. I put each line into a spreadsheet. Date, description, amount, purpose. Within an hour, the total glowed back at me in bold numbers, $24,337.41. I closed the laptop and took a deep breath. The number wasn't about money. It was about acknowledgement. Every dollar represented a moment I chose to help, to give without thought of thanks. Yet not one word of gratitude had ever come my way. Not a simple thank you or I appreciate you. Instead, I'd been given a deadline. Move out by the end of the month. I opened the manila folder I kept tucked beneath my bed. Inside were photocopies of receipts for the washer and dryer set, the gas stove I installed when the old one broke, the plywood and paint for the fence, the roof repairs, the new air filter for Greg's allergies, even the invoice for the custom bookshelf I'd had built to match Harold's old study desk. I flipped through each paper, feeling the weight of every sacrifice. Pulling a single sheet from the folder, a deposit agreement for a mobile home I'd nearly signed 2 years ago, I traced the faded ink with my finger. The tiny house was on a wooded lot outside town, a modest 2-bedroom with a screened-in porch and space enough for a small garden. I'd backed out when Mara called about rising daycare costs, but that deposit had stayed in my savings, untouched. I dialed the mobile home park office. A polite woman answered, "Green Acres Residency." I asked about availability, monthly rent, deposit returns. When she confirmed that a 2-bedroom was open and that my old deposit would still hold, I felt a thrill I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Next, I called Camille. "I'm ready," I said simply. She laughed, relieved. "I'll bring my truck tomorrow morning. We'll start moving your things." I told her which receipts to grab, which boxes to pack first. We spoke of small details, where to put my quilt, how to fold the artwork, which dishes to take. For the first time in months, I felt in control. That afternoon, I made one last stop, the U-Haul depot. The young man at the counter showed me a small truck that would fit everything. He handed me the keys and a clipboard. I signed the forms without hesitation. The paperwork was straightforward, no hidden fees. I could pay monthly without dipping further into my pension. Driving home, the empty truck bed behind me, I passed the neighborhood I'd called home for 3 years. I felt no pang of regret, only a quiet certainty. They didn't see me as a mother anymore, so I'd stop being what they wanted. I'd be myself. Back at the house, I walked through each room one last time. I gathered the quilt I'd made with Harold's flannel shirts, the board games we used to play, the novels lined neatly on my shelf, the kitchen gadgets I'd saved for Christmas. I boxed the stamped letters the boys had sent me, the hand-knit socks, the birthday cards. I took only what I'd paid for and left behind everything else. Before I climbed into the truck, I wrote a note on a Post-it and stuck it to the kitchen counter. I'm not begging to stay, I'm choosing to leave. What I paid for, I'm taking. What you gave, I leave behind. I stepped back, squared my shoulders, and closed the door. The echo of its click felt like a starting pistol. I climbed into the driver's seat, and Camille climbed in beside me. She smiled and said, "Ready?" "Ready," I replied. As we pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The house stood quiet, colder than the thermostat reading, but I didn't look back. My eyes were on the road ahead, toward my new porch, my new garden, my new life. One where I would be seen, valued, and honored just for being myself. The first light of dawn found me stirring in my new little trailer, the gentle hum of a small heater where only silence lived before. I sat up on the narrow bed, my feet brushing the edge of the quilt I'd folded so carefully that morning. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking to someone else's schedule or someone else's demands. I was waking to my own space, modest but mine. Packing had been quieter than I expected. Camille and I moved through the old house before sunrise, slipping boxes and bags into the U-Haul without a single slammed door. We carried only the items I'd paid for myself, the gas stove I'd installed, the washer and dryer set, the instant pot I treated myself to one Christmas, the custom bookshelf carved from oak. We even packed the books I kept hidden on the bottom shelves, the photo albums full of memories that belonged to me alone. We left behind the frame prints that had hung on walls that never felt like home, the mismatched tchotchkes that weren't mine. Back in the trailer, I placed each box carefully. The stove went in the tiny kitchen, the washer and dryer in their own little nook, and the bookshelf in the corner by the window. I unfurled my quilt over the bed, its patchwork of deep reds and blues suddenly brighter in this new morning light. I arranged my novels on the top shelf, my husband's favorite detective novels, the poetry collections I never finished reading. Each item felt like a small victory, a reminder that I had built this life for myself, not for someone else's convenience. On the counter, I left a single note on a Post-it I kept for taxes. In tidy handwriting, I wrote, "I only took what I paid for. What you gave, you keep." I stuck it right below the coffee mug I'd brought, a simple white mug with a chipped rim that had held my morning tea countless times. The note wasn't for them, it was for me. A quiet declaration that I no longer needed their approval to know my worth. After that, I moved on to the practical details. I called the locksmith I'd researched months ago, the one with the review that said, "Fast, friendly, and discreet." He arrived with a toolbox and a courteous nod. In 20 minutes, he had changed the deadbolt and latch on the front door. When he handed me the new set of keys, they felt warm in my palm, almost pulsing with promise. I tested the lock, turned the key, and heard the satisfying click, a sound I hadn't heard in a long time. Next, I set up auto pay for rent. I logged into my savings account, an account I'd secretly built little by little after Harold died, and arranged the monthly payment. The numbers scrolled across the screen. Remaining balance, next rental due date, auto pay confirmed. It felt good to see my finances organized for me, rather than for someone else's benefit. That evening, I made tea in my new mug and settled into the rocking chair on the small porch. The trailer park was quiet at dusk, the air carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I wrapped the quilt around my shoulders and breathed in deep. No thermostat fights, no missing thank yous, no hush of pity when I slipped in beside them. Just me, my mug, and the honest quiet. When the sun dipped low, I flipped through a small notebook where I'd started listing things I wouldn't miss. My chair tucked under a table where I was last reserve guest. The thermostat set at 65 degrees, no blankets offered. The boxes of Mom's things shoved in a closet. The empty nods when I said goodnight to my grandchildren. Each line felt like a weight lifting, a confirmation that those memories belonged in the past. Later, I heard a soft knock on the door. I opened it to find Leota from Unit 3B, holding a tin of homemade cookies. "Welcome home," she said, her smile warm under the porch light. "We do card night Thursdays if you ever want to stop by." I invited her in for tea, my first official host role, and we sat at the tiny kitchen table, sipping strong black tea and sharing stories about grandchildren and garden clubs. No one asked me to clean up. No one rushed to remind me of chores. It was simple kindness. That night, I crawled into bed and listened to the quiet, the faint hum of the heater, the rustle of leaves outside, the gentle beating of my own heart. I closed my eyes and felt something settle inside me, a sense of belonging I hadn't known in years. Before I drifted off, I wrote one more line in my notebook. I didn't lose a home. I found myself. And in the stillness, I finally believed it. When the call started, I'd just finished arranging fresh flowers in a mason jar on my little dining table. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I had planned to sit out on the porch with my knitting. Instead, my phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. The caller ID read Mara Colton. I let it ring. A few minutes later, it buzzed again. Greg this time. I silenced the ringer. Then it was Mara again, and Greg, and Mara. By the 5th call, I glanced at the screen, saw their faces, and turned my phone face down on the table. I knew exactly what they wanted. Help. They'd come to depend on my cooking, my laundry, my quiet presence. Now, without a warning, the kitchen was stripped of my appliances, the pantry bare, the thermostat mine alone to set. That evening, Mara's voicemail was frantic. "Mom, please, the stove isn't working right and the boys are hungry. Can you just bring the instant pot or something?" I didn't return the call. Instead, I sipped chamomile tea and watched the steam curl from my mug, tracing lazy spirals in the soft lamplight. I thought of the nights I'd cooked breakfast burritos at dawn, lunch casseroles for the twins, Sunday roasts for holiday dinners. None of it registered once I locked the door behind me. The 6th call came at midnight. Greg sounded defeated. "Ruth, we need the washer. You took clothes and linens. It's all piled up at home." I lay in bed, the crisp quilt wrapped around me, and let his words fade into the dark. By the 10th call, Mara's tone had shifted from anger to desperation. "Mom, I'm sorry, we messed up. Can you come back, please?" I watched the light through my window, a single porch bulb casting long shadows across the gravel drive. I pictured Mara's eyes, rimmed red with worry, and felt a quiet satisfaction. They finally realized I wasn't just a pair of hands or a wallet on legs. I was the backbone they'd taken for granted. I didn't pick up. The next morning, I took my coffee to the picnic table outside and joined Leota, June, and Marisol, 3 widows I'd met at Friday bingo. We played dominoes, our laughter mingling with the chirp of cardinals in the pines. When my phone lit up again, I glanced down at the screen. It was Mara. Then I did something I hadn't done before. I slid the phone into my bag, turned it off, and left it there. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. A week later, the mail carrier handed me an envelope, the handwriting small and careful. Inside was a drawing on a paper plate, crayon sticks of bright colors, a little trailer with chipped yellow paint, a door wide open, a stick figure woman sitting in a rocking chair waving. At the top, in uneven letters, it read, "Grandma's Real Home." I held the plate at arm's length, my heart warming like the sun breaking through clouds. My granddaughter's drawing wasn't just art, it was validation. It said, "I see you, Grandma. This is where you belong." I taped that paper plate to the inside of my refrigerator door, right above the list of groceries and next to a postcard from Camille's garden club. Every time I opened the fridge, I'd see that drawing and feel the truth settle deeper in my bones. That afternoon, I made a cup of tea in my chipped white mug and sat with my feet propped up on the coffee table. Outside, the wind rustled the pine needles and sunlight fell in dappled patterns across my quilt. I closed my eyes and smiled, thinking how this place, modest, quiet, entirely mine, was more of a home than any house I'd ever lived in. I thought about Mara and Greg, probably scrambling to restock their kitchen, hunting for laundry piles, apologizing through tears. Tomorrow, Mara might send another apology line in a text. Maybe Greg would call about rent money, or the boys might ask their mother why Grandma moved away. But none of it would shake me, because I knew what they'd finally learned. You don't lose someone when they leave. You lose them when you never saw them. Now I'm here, warm, heard, remembered, and in that silence, I found my recognition. Have you ever poured your heart into a relationship only to realize your kindness was taken for granted? Share a time when you felt invisible in the lives of those you love and discovered that stepping away helped you reclaim your worth. Did you find peace in a new community like I did when I moved into my own space? Were you surprised when someone finally recognized your contributions, even if it was through a simple act of kindness? Tell us about that turning point. Your experience could give courage to someone still struggling to find their voice. Whether you quietly removed yourself, demanded respect, or simply chose self-care, how did that decision change your life? Join our community of warriors who transform pain into empowerment. Real revenge story journeys where healing happens in silence. Leave your story below, celebrate your growth, and remind each other you are valued. How did it feel when you finally said enough? What victories did you celebrate in secret that no one else witnessed? Describe the moment you embraced boundaries and chose yourself. Sometimes the quietest actions speak the loudest. Go ahead, share your reply and remind everyone that your voice truly matters.